So it's just telling you how that when you these positives are just saying that there are people who have been exposed over the course of 3 months. Um, you don't know. I'm not saying that the masks don't work. I'm not saying that shutdowns don't work. What I am saying is that if the virus is less deadly to people 25 and under, and this economy isn't serving them, and then you shut it down and make them even more poor, I don't necessarily think it's sound to do that, because you're saying somehow transitively people who are 70 and 80 and 90 might get infected because they get infected. You can't stop people from coming in contact with a virus. There are viruses everywhere. From what I understand, there's at least 5 different viruses that tend to be in the human body, sometimes 10. They don't do anything, but they're in there. They replicate at astronomical rates. They get on stuff, you breathe them in. And I don't think Fauci's part of a conspiracy. I think he's being a regular bureaucrat. And when bureaucrats see that their measures didn't work, they tend to double down on them because they don't want to make their relevance. If it turns out that Fauci was wrong about something, like he was wrong in his approach to AIDS, he was wrong in not making it clear that blood to semen created higher levels of AIDS transmission than semen to semen, giving pro-LGBT doctors more room and more license and more foundation to do what needed to be done to stop the actual deadliness of it. You know, because before they were like, just stop having sex, abstain. You know, well, that's stupid. Now they're like, you can have sex and we have something that neutralizes HIV and prevents it becoming AIDS. That's really where we need to be. But the fact is often bureaucrats they're not in that mindset. Bureaucrats are often not in the mindset of, they're not in the mindset of changing their course. The stuff that Fauci says is not pure epidemiology. It's epidemiology plus sociology plus political science plus mass communications. The science is just, it's too new for them to really have good enough answers. But the fact that he doesn't mention that he was taking vitamin C and vitamin D and zinc on a massive level until the fall is concerning. Like, well, we don't want to say certain things because we don't want people to just go out and take vitamin D and zinc and then just go out and interact with each other. That may have been the better. It may have been the better course. It may not have been. But the fact of the matter is, he's still a human being, and to treat Fauci like a god, and to treat the CDC like its word is law until when it says something that you don't like, is no more credible than for Donald Trump's people to assume that they're going to find enough votes to overturn the election. Neither are sound. You know, the fact is that Joe Biden and many other Democrats are firmly behind this idea of maybe shutting things down, of masks, of telling people not to go to bars, of all this other stuff. I'm not seeing the hard science saying any of this is true. If they can't isolate and identify a virus, if they can't do random control studies and random control tests because they say it's unethical, then you just aren't in a position to tell me not to have Thanksgiving dinner or have to have bars or whatever. I'm not saying that you're wrong about the ethics, but if you're not going to do a random control test on people with and without a virus, where you're taking the virus, taking what you know to be the virus, and I guess what you'd have to do is put it in a person and watch it replicate and then study that. If you're just saying, well, we're copying RNA, then you're in such a rudimentary stage. It doesn't matter if you're an epidemiologist and I'm not. I know that you're not identifying live virus with these PCR tests. You're not. So I don't know what the cases mean. And finally, if this disease is so rampant, why can't you give me estimates on what percentage of the population is being infected? You know, at one point, you know, a couple months ago, the CDC estimated. Dr. Fauci was talking. He says only 9% of the population is has been infected, and that's okay. 9% of the population has been infected by September, October. What does that mean? It means that based on an average, because Dr. Fauci was very clear that he didn't think that anybody would be reinfected within less than a year's time. He said that. He said, I bet it all that's a year, and we're not seeing mass cases of reinfection. We're not seeing thousands of people who were infected in April going back to the hospital, because that would be So if we're assuming that people don't get infected over a year's time, that means that from March, you're talking about maybe 1.2% of the population is being infected per month. If you communicated it in that way, it would change the entire dynamic. And I'm not sure Donald Trump wouldn't be I'm not sure Donald Trump would not be president of the United States now. If only 10% of the population has been infected, then that means that the case percentage was lower than the overall percentage of the population that was infected. That is a startling contrast to how that's presented, because generally cases are defined as, generally cases are perceived to be some sample of what percentage of the population has been infected. But that's every 2 weeks. See, that's the problem, is that the PCR case test is not offering any sense of what percentage of the population is infected. It's not. And there's been no attempt to give you a rolling. They were just saying, hey, here are cases. Here are cases. We got X number of cases. So therefore we have, clearly the assumption is that more than 2.5% of the population has gotten COVID-19, because that's what your 10 million cases or whatever, that's roughly, well, I guess that's 3% of the population. That's not enough to shut down the entire economy. It's just not. You know what I'm saying? The CDC stated that you're talking about 10 to 13 times more virus, or more people have been infected than cases. Now, it's very interesting because Republicans, like people like Eric Erickson, are like, no, that's nonsense, because they're not really, I don't think they're invested in what's going on. They just want to say no to everything. I'm saying I'm going to, until you show me that you don't know what you're talking about, I'm going to assume that your cases represent infections. I'm not going to assume that you're not really, I don't have a way to disprove what you're saying. I have no way of doing that. I think it's a shaky and shabby system you have with different levels of application. But the bottom line is I have no way of, so I'm going to accept that you have 10 million, 12 million, I think about 12 million cases now. If you multiply that times 13, that's 156 million people who have been infected. If you multiply that by 10, that's 120 million people been infected. What does that mean? It means that if you're starting from March, that's starting from March. Now, if you're starting from November, that's a whole other set of calculus, because that means less than 1% of the population is being infected per month. But that also means that not a high percentage of the population was being infected per month before March without any mitigation. What that basically means is this. If you're talking about 120 to 150 million people infected, you're talking about close to 40% of the population